Hey there, friends. It's Allison Dixon flying solo yet again, which can either mean all my friends have turned against me, or it's just time for another installment of Ding Dong Ditch. Speaking of people turning on one another, this episode features the dark side of a very popular social pastime karaoke. While getting liquored up at the local watering hole and belting out a tune might seem a harmless way to spend a Saturday night, in the Philippines, choosing to sing one song in particular might just get you killed. So stick around and we'll dive into the what, the how, and the why of karaoke rage and the My Way Killings. Music is a vital proxy. Through countless songs and lyrics, we seek and find identity and use it as a projection of ourselves to the world. This is particularly true during adolescence. Teenage me can certainly attest to this. I could still so clearly remember holing up in my bedroom with The Cure warbling their gothic, lovelorn confessionals into my ear holes. Though I'm not nearly the brooding wannabe poet I once was, the Disintegration album is still imprinted on my very soul. But this passionate knife can cut the other way. Some songs elicit such high levels of distaste and annoyance, they can completely ruin a person's mood. I'm looking at you, We Built This City by Jefferson Starship. Your mileage may vary, but something about this song drives me bananas. If it comes on and I can't immediately change the station, I'm looking for the nearest exit. Even a pit of rabid jackals would suffice. Take these examples I just described and think about your own songs, the ones that rev your emotional tachometer into the red zone. Then go sit in a crowded karaoke bar. Add a few glugs of alcohol to your bloodstream, along with a dash of pride, a few pinches of existential desperation, and a string of bum notes. This is the perfect recipe for lethal karaoke rage. The phenomenon is real, such that when I set out to research just one set of events related to one song, I found myself going further down a global, blood-soaked sing-along rabbit hole. Incidents are varied and widespread, and they seem to relate mostly to things like singing badly, repeating the same songs over and over, or refusing to surrender the mic after your turn is done, all of which are big no-nos in karaoke etiquette. In 2008, a Malaysian man was stabbed to death for overstaying his welcome with the microphone. That same year in Thailand, a man became so enraged by his neighbors having a karaoke party that after warning them to stop repeatedly singing John Denver's Take Me Home, Country Roads, that's another We Built This City for me, he snapped and shot 8 people dead, one of them his brother-in-law. In another incident in 2014, a Seattle woman assaulted a man on stage over his take on Coldplay's Yellow. Again, in my opinion, I'm not even sure Chris Martin could get that one right for me, but it isn't always attacks on the singers either. Sometimes the mere presence of karaoke can be enough to kick off the violence. One such incident occurred in a restaurant in China during a family karaoke night. A toddler was having a tantrum and refused to give up the mic. So the kid's uncle started berating his father for spoiling him too much. Some pushing and shoving eventually led to the father's nephew grabbing a meat cleaver and hacking him and another man to death. While there are probably some other toxic family dynamics at play here, the karaoke was the spark to the powder keg. In fact, there's another incident that's grabbed recent headlines as of this recording in August of 2022. Actor Ezra Miller, who plays The Flash and will have probably racked up another dozen or so allegations of assault or grooming minors by the time I finish this recording, was arrested in Hawaii earlier this year for assaulting a woman in a karaoke bar by screaming obscenities at her and grabbing her mic after she started singing. Though to be fair, Miller doesn't seem like someone who goes out of their way to avoid trouble in any venue, karaoke or no. But as I mentioned in the intro, there is a particularly problematic song in the Philippines. In the mid-2000s, it precipitated a high enough number of violent deaths that the authorities and the media designated them the My Way Killings. And yes, I'm speaking about that old Frank Sinatra's signature tune, My Way. I'll dig more deeply into this song in a minute to see if I can come up with a reason why this one in particular sparks so much rage. The most well-known article documenting the My Way Killings phenomenon was published in the New York Times back in 2010, and it reported that the exact number of deaths attributed to the old Blue Eyes standard is unknown, but various articles written since then estimate between half and 1 dozen since 2002. And that only includes deaths, not non-lethal violence. The incident that really brought the song's correlation with deadly violence to the media's attention was in 2007. A 29-year-old man was singing it off-key, and he refused to stop once people started booing him. The bar security guard then decided to solve the problem by pulling out his gun and shooting him to death. It was then the rest of the world began to learn about the sheer ubiquity of karaoke in the Philippines. There are machines in nearly every bar and restaurant, and even out on street corners in areas both urban and rural. The activity provides a cheap and accessible respite for working class people in poorer neighborhoods who can pop 5 pesos into a machine and lose themselves in song for a brief time. But for those who don't want to run afoul of folks that are in a stabby or shooty kind of mood, and if they have the money, they can go to joints that have their own private karaoke cubicles and invite their friends and families. And if you couldn't already tell, people here take their karaoke very seriously. The machines tally the running scores of the singers, which only adds to the pressure to do well. Etiquette also extends to audiences who don't want to be caught laughing or looking askance at a struggling performer. Frank Sinatra fans are also in big numbers in the Philippines, so not only are there many who want to sing My Way by virtue of just loving the man himself, there are even more who don't want to tolerate hearing him sung poorly, which could be one reason for the incidents involving this particular song. It's a little unforgiving to those who don't have a strong command of their pipes. But let's talk more about My Way and why I and others think it might lead to pissing people off a little bit. It was written by legendary songwriter Paul Anka. Think Can't Take My Eyes Off You, that earworm by Frankie Valli, or Puppy Love, or You Are My Destiny, anything you might hear being played in a movie that takes place in the 1950s at some makeout point somewhere. That's a lot of Paul Anka's work. Frank Sinatra's career was on the decline by 1968. The Rat Pack's popularity was as faded as my memory of the world before cell phones, but he decided to declare to Paul that he was leaving the business because he just couldn't relate to this new musical landscape filled with folks like Elvis and the Beatles and people who couldn't cut their damn hair. Just think of every grumpy old man rant you've ever heard in your life. So Anka, who was bereft and never previously applying his writing chops to Sinatra's legendary vocals, goes home and writes this unapologetic, macho declaration of a successful life and career specifically for Sinatra. He even claimed he tried to put himself into Frank's mind space and write it as he himself would. After he put it to music from a French pop song whose rights he purchased a few years prior, the final result is something about as tough and prideful as Frank himself, a song that perhaps no one other than someone who led a life like his was fit to sing. Though, of course, that hasn't stopped the likes of Elvis Presley, Sid Vicious, Nina Simone, Sammy Davis Jr., and even Willie Nelson from covering it. That's okay though, because those people have all lived pretty big lives themselves, and whoever sings a song with lyrics like this, it should be someone with a commanding presence and the singing skills to really sell it. My Way ended up becoming Frank Sinatra's most successful song, hitting the top 10 and remaining in the top 40 for most of the year after it came out. And like so many of Sinatra's songs, it remains as popular and instantly recognizable as ever. That said, his daughter Tina would later say her father came to hate the song due to its self-indulgent nature, but because it had become his signature croon, he just couldn't get rid of it. It was like a persistent dog turd stuck to his shoe. So let's dig down and include some of the lyrics here. Just note there are a few minor variations from site to site, And they differ from what Frank sings depending on what album you're listening to, but the sentiments are identical across the board. I'm only going to speak the words because I'm sure if I actually tried to sing them, someone would pull a knife on me, and it might even be myself. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much, much more, I did it my way. Yes, there were times I'm sure you knew when I bit off more than I could chew, but through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all and I stood tall, and I did it my way. For what is a man, what has he got? If not himself, then he has naught. Not to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of someone who kneels. Let the record show I took all the blows and did it my way. You know, I may be wrong here, and certainly if you listen to this song, you can't help but be captivated by Sinatra's actual singing. But since this is my podcast and you can always leave a review stating your disagreement, I'm just going to be blunt. This is a song for assholes. If you were sharing a room with someone talking like this, you'd get up and go somewhere else. You talk trash about them all the way home. My Way is riddled with more arrogance than pepper jack cheese with pepper flecks. It exudes more machismo than a John Wayne convention. It's a song that in today's world demands only to be sung with heavy irony, perhaps as an ode to Burger King with a Whopper in hand, because it's one of the only places on this planet where you can still have it your way. Donald Trump played this song at his inauguration. Honestly, I think that's all I needed to say to make my point, and I'm not even being political with that statement. It's a song not merely of triumph, but of I won, fuck you. And while that may work in some contexts, when it comes to, a presidential election, it feels a little tacky. But that's just me. So take everything this song represents and plunk it down in the middle of a packed, drunken karaoke bar in a struggling part of Manila, where according to gun and violence statistics, life might be more like the Wild West of yore. Only instead of player pianos plunking away a soundtrack, it's karaoke singers looking for a little escape from a difficult life. Karaoke singers who have been through a lot and who have very little patience for bad singing, especially of songs that make you look and sound like a giant self-obsessed douche nozzle. It's not hard to imagine My Way being the last straw. Frankly, pun somewhat intended, I'm surprised there haven't been more deaths associated with this song. If the human brain does indeed have a why I ought to kick your ass button, and I think it does somewhere in the amygdala region, then Sinatra's rendition of My Way is a cartoon-sized whack-a-mole mallet for said button. Not that I'm excusing the violence, mind you, but human beings can be impulsive in their violence. And I think it's important to understand how a pile of circumstances can trigger certain reactions. As to why My Way in particular is the knife and bullet vector and not some other tune like Nookie by Limp Bizkit or the aforementioned Cheese Fest, We Built This City, again, I got my eye on you, Jefferson Starship, or some other song that regularly makes a top 50 worst list on the internet, your guess is as good as mine, but I tend to side with the gentleman in the New York Times article who said it's because everyone knows My Way, and so they have an opinion about it. Singing it well is difficult, as I said. As with a lot of those old standards, you do it at your peril. So after 2010, violence over the song has largely diminished, which is good. Mostly because of the bloody legend it spawned, creating the belief, at least in the Philippines, that it's cursed. In fact, My Way has grown taboo enough that when a local government official was assassinated in 2017, people discovered he'd sung My Way the night before. Most owners of karaoke establishments have also removed it from their machines. Furthermore, many aspiring Filipino crooners have also chosen to just avoid performing it, simply out of the desire to not be stabbed, beaten, or shot. That said, in 2018, a 61-year-old man who intended to sing the song at a birthday party stabbed someone to death when they tried to stop him from singing it. So My Way is still having its way with folks foolhardy enough to try and step into Frank's shoes. But My Way has done a whole lot more than inspire some karaoke enthusiasts to get a little stabby. It's also influenced the geopolitical status of the former Soviet Union. Now, this is funny. I did not expect this when I was doing my research, but here we go. In 1989, USSR President Mikhail Gorbachev, influenced by the Sinatra tune, instituted the Sinatra Doctrine, where countries behind the Iron Curtain would be doing their own thing, aka running things my way. This was intended to displace the Brezhnev Doctrine, which ensured all countries within the USSR would function as a solitary communist unit. Well, in Poland, this led to the election of their first democratically elected president, and I'm going to get his name wrong, so please forgive me, Lech Walesa. Worried a communist would nab the job, he ran under the slogan, "I don't want to, but I have to." As a result, he won in a landslide and eventually won the Nobel Peace Prize. According to an article on AV Club, where I learned this fascinating tidbit of history, Walesa is on Wikipedia's list of notable Polish people, because of course he is, but it's alongside someone named Wojtek Persky, who is a brown bear who became a soldier in the Polish army. That's not a story for this particular podcast, but if you want to know more about it, I urge you to check it out. I will link it in the show notes. So that concludes my little dive into karaoke violence and the My Way killings that have spawned all manner of internet fascination. Music is a hell of a thing. It fortifies, it inspires. It's also a handy scapegoat for a lot of shitty human behavior. Is My Way a cursed song? Of course not. Especially not on its own. You won't play it backward and find a satanic message buried in there. There isn't anything inherently sinister about it. But people are complicated. And as a dear colleague of mine has often told me, they're rarely motivated to violence by one thing. They're motivated by one thing too many. When considering all of the socioeconomic factors at play in the Philippines and the popularity of karaoke, it's not hard to see why there is a collection of corpses to lay at Paul Anka's feet. Okay, is that fair of me? Probably not. It's classic to want to blame the author, want to blame the writer of the video game, to want to blame the songwriter, when in fact you should be blaming the killers and the people who can't control themselves. But if I were Paul Anka, I would no doubt be having some late night ponderings on what I might have unleashed on the world when I wrote that song. In the event this podcast is responsible, by the way, for any acts of violence, I just want to apologize in advance. But in the meantime, I urge you to head over to iTunes, pull up Ding Dong Darkness Time, and leave a review, or message me at dddarknesstime@gmail.com if you have any suggestions for interesting ditch episodes. Thanks goes to Brett from The Prosecutors, by the way, for turning me on to this one. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out seasons 1 and 2 of the show if you haven't already. There's a lot of fun content on there, and I think you'll enjoy yourself. Season 3, Class of Cults, is coming soon, but before that, I'll be back with more crazy stories. So until the next one, be good, you little ding-dongs.